In the last episode, Lin and Hammer Girl ventured into the Dragon Palace dungeon. It was there that Lin quickly realized the dragons in this place weren't always the same. On his first run, he faced an ice demon dragon. However, his overconfidence nearly cost him dearly. But in the end, they narrowly made it through. Now, they've entered again, only to face the infamous Black Demon Dragon, said to be the most difficult one yet. As we picked up where we left off, the place was pitch dark, with Lin's soul flame serving as their only light source. Suddenly, the dragon woke up, its massive body rising from the shadows. Through the flickering light of the soul flame, the creature looked more menacing than anything they had ever seen. It was much larger than the ice dragon by far, and its stats were terrifying with 150,000 strength, 200,000 vitality, 3 powerful skills, and special traits that included 80% damage reduction, enhanced curse resistance, and a huge boost to its health. All of a sudden, the dragon exhaled a steaming breath, creating a powerful gust of wind that tore through the cave. Lin quickly got ready and summoned his skeleton army, but something felt off, or maybe dangerous. Even though he reacted quickly, it was still too late. Without warning, the dragon charged directly at the skeletal warriors, using its first skill, Frenzied Charge. Lin tried to command his skeletons to scatter, but it was already too late. The dragon plowed through them, scattering bones everywhere. That single devastating blow wiped out 29 skeletons in one hit. Then, just as abruptly, the dragon halted, but it gave Lin no time to regroup. It slammed its feet into the ground, unleashing its second skill, Earthquake Blast. The entire cave began to shake violently, and the ground split apart. Lin tried to recall his skeletons back into the summoning space, but the attack had already landed, meaning he couldn't recall them in time. The ground roared as a wave of destructive energy surged outward, even more terrifying than the previous charge. This time, 72 more skeletons were obliterated. Lin had realized a while ago that his skeletons could no longer tank the boss's attacks like they used to. The stat difference was simply too much, and if he wasn't careful enough, he could lose a bunch of his skellies just like this. But there was no time to hesitate. He immediately used his Mighty Soldier skill, buffing all of the skellies by massively increasing their stats. By doing so, they could at least withstand the dragon's relentless attacks and hold on long enough for the dragon's skills to go on cooldown. With that, the skeletal warriors charged in once again. Hammer Girl didn't just stand by either. Clutching her massive hammer, she charged at the dragon. She wasn't just relying on Lin's skeletal armor. She even activated her own defensive skill. Even so, Lin couldn't help but worry. He called out, telling her to fall back to safety. But Hammer Girl looked dead serious, and what happened next left Lin utterly speechless. It turned out her innate talent was combat instinct. As the name suggests, it was a rare talent that essentially gave her an ultra instinct, which basically allowed her to sense the blind spots in even the most devastating attacks. This also explained how she always seemed to perfectly time her skills, whether it was her collection skill or stun skill, every single time. Now everything made sense. Without hesitation, Hammer Girl charged straight at the dragon. As she got close, she leaped into the air and activated her collection skill. The dragon's aggro immediately shifted to her, and in response it lashed out with its tail. A move so fast and at such close range that dodging was nearly impossible. This was the dragon's third skill, Tail Sweep. Things weren't looking good. Even with her combat instinct, avoiding such a strike seemed impossible. Hammer Girl must have realized it too. Instead of retreating, she chose not to dodge at all. Without hesitation, she swung her massive hammer directly at the dragon's tail, activating her stun skill in the process. The two attacks collided in a deafening explosion. Her skeletal armor flared wildly, absorbing most of the impact, but she was still flung backward, crashing hard into the stone wall of the cave, causing her skeletal armor to shatter completely. Lin quickly checked her condition and let out a sigh of relief. The skeletal armor had absorbed the brunt of the damage, and combined with her defensive skill, she was fine. When he turned back to the dragon, he saw a stun icon appearing on top of its head. He was slightly shocked. The stun had actually worked. Lin couldn't help but marvel at Hammer Girl's incredible luck. With the dragon temporarily immobilized, Lin knew he couldn't waste this rare opportunity. He quickly assessed his skelly, and everyone still had the Mighty Soldier buff. Seizing the moment, the skeletal warriors surged forward, launching a relentless barrage of rampage strikes. Behind them, the skeletal mages cast 4 different elemental spells in rapid succession. Lin himself joined the fight, hurling soul flame and bone spikes at the stunned dragon. For 5 relentless seconds, they went full DPS mode, and the results were clear. Finally, the dragon boss let out one last roar before collapsing. Hammer Girl rushed back, grinning from ear to ear, and asked excitedly if they really defeated it. Lin smiled and told her once again she had outdone herself. She replied cheerfully, looking a bit flustered, saying she didn't expect her luck to be this good either. Just then, Lin received a system notification. Defeated Black Demon Dragon, rewarding him 5.5 million experience, a Dragon King token and 6 dragon crystals. And of course, with the collection skill, all loots were doubled. Curious, Lin inspected the Dragon King's token. The item description read, "Proof is required to access the dungeon Dragon King's Hall, located at the bottom level of the Eternal Trial Ground." Lin was slightly taken aback. A dungeon located at the bottom level? He hadn't expected to get something this rare from slaying the Black Dragon, but he knew it would take a long time to reach that point. Tossing the token into his storage space, he decided to think about it later. Hammer Girl, however, was already fired up. She suggested they keep going. Maybe they even have time to defeat every type of dragon in the Dragon Palace. Lin chuckled at her enthusiasm. With that, the two exited the dungeon to prepare for their next attempt. When they entered the dungeon for the 3rd time, they faced the Wind Demon Dragon. The setting had shifted to a vast, barren desert of rocky terrain, where fierce winds howled endlessly. The raging sandstorm forced Hammer Girl to shield her eyes just to see ahead. It didn't take long for them to locate the boss. The Wind Demon Dragon wasn't particularly large, but its enormous wings whipped up powerful whirlwinds with every beat. Each gust scattered sand and sent debris flying, making it nearly impossible for Lin's skeletal warriors to get close. They had no choice but to rely on the skeletal mages, who hurled spells from a distance. Even that was proving difficult, as an invisible barrier of wind surrounded the dragon, deflecting their attacks effortlessly. Getting a bit annoyed, the Hammer Girl couldn't resist shouting at it, saying even the Black Dragon wasn't a match for them. She insulted it, calling it a puny wind dragon and demanding it give up already. Almost like the dragon could understand her insults, the boss finally launched its attack, unleashing a powerful gust of wind from its mouth. In response, Hammer Girl countered with her hammer and easily blocked the attack. Wasting no time, she leaped into the air and smashed her hammer down onto the dragon's head, while using her stun skill. This time, though, her luck ran out, and the stun didn't go off. Protected by the skeletal armor, the swirling wind around the boss didn't do any damage to her. Undeterred by her failed attempt, she steadied herself. She knew that the cooldown for her skill was just 1 minute, so she wasn't one to back down. Again and again, she swung her hammer, even after failing a bunch of times, refused to quit. Minutes passed, and she was getting a bit tired, but luckily for her, this time it finally worked. Her hammer struck once again, and the dragon's head sagged as a stun icon appeared above it. With that, the massive beast crashed to the ground with a thunderous thud. And now, it's showtime for our boy. Summoning the rest of his skeleton army, he commanded them to swarm the dragon in their favorite style, a good, old-fashioned gangbang. And before long, the dragon finally fell. Wiping sweat from her forehead, Hammer Girl grinned at Lin, saying she was getting the hang of this now. With a cheerful smile, she said she was ready for the next round. Their synergy only improved from there. Together, they were up against a few more types of dragons, like the Poison Demon Dragon, the Fire Demon Dragon, and even the Lightning Demon Dragon. Time blurred as they grind through the dungeon again and again until they had completed it 8 times in total. Thanks to Hammer Girl's collection skill, they had accumulated an impressive 72 dragon crystals. As they exited the dungeon one last time, Mo Yun swooped down to meet them. She warned Lin that the dungeon entrance's energy was becoming unstable, a sign that it was about to disappear. She was concerned. Once the dungeon vanished, demons and dragons could spill out, putting Lin in danger. Lin, however, simply smiled and said he wasn't in a hurry to leave. Mo Yun hesitated as if realizing what Lin was about to do. Lin raised his hand slowly, his gaze cold and sharp. With a sinister smile, he tells her that he's gonna block the gate, and that it was time for some hunting. Oof, more experience and merits are incoming. With a single command, his skellies materialized from the ground and quickly surrounded the dungeon entrance. Turning to Hammer Girl, He reminded her not to forget to use her collection skill. She nodded confidently, assuring him she wouldn't miss a single one. Soon, one team exited the dungeon, and they turned out to be a group of human professionals. Lin greeted them politely, first apologized, but then advised them to leave this area immediately. One of the dudes bristled at the request, questioning Lin's authority, and argued they still had time for one more dungeon run. However, the captain of the team suddenly recognized Lin and quickly stepped in to stop his teammates. He smiled and said that they would be leaving. Not far away, the others grumbled, questioning why they had to back down and what was so special about him anyway. The captain replied, telling them that the person right there was Lin, and the dungeon was about to disappear, so they wouldn't have time for another run. But a few of them weren't having it, saying even if he was Lin, and sure, he's kinda OP, but it doesn't mean he can just block the gate. The captain then glanced at the swirling dungeon vortex, but didn't explain further and simply replied, "You'll find out soon." Moments later, the dungeon entrance began to distort. All remaining participants were forcibly ejected as the dungeon started to disappear. Lin acted swiftly, marking the enemies, both demons and dragons, before activating Mighty Soldiers. Hammer Girl followed up with her group collection skill, and Lin quickly unleashed Bone Spikes. The demons and dragons, caught off guard, initially appeared confused. They were pretty sure they were hit by something, but didn't seem to do any damage at first. However, the unfortunate ones standing at the very front soon found themselves pierced as deadly spikes erupted from the ground. Chaos erupted as the enemies realized they were under attack, and the culprit was none other than Lin himself. Lin's skeleton army moved in seamlessly, targeting the enemies impaled by bone spikes and swiftly finishing them off. At the same time, Mo Yun called out to the human professionals, shouting for them to get away from the dungeon entrance. Though unsure of what was happening, they decided to listen to her warning. Once Lin confirmed that no human professionals remained in the area, he let out a smirk. Raising his hand, he declared, "Time for a good old explosion." The ground trembled as a massive explosion erupted, its sheer force shaking the entire area. Watching from a safe distance, the human professionals broke into a cold sweat, gulping hard as they finally understood why their captain had insisted on retreating. It turns out that this is what he had been planning all along.